All right, so here's how you learn a language from absolute zero. All right, so a couple years ago, I knew zero Vietnamese, and now I can pretty much hold my own in any kind of conversation. And on top of that, I can understand most of what's said to me as well. And I've had tons of Vietnamese conversations. I've been able to interact with people and everything. If you want to get to that point, it's actually very simple what you have to do. It's just not easy. All right, but I'm going to be breaking down everything that you need to do in this video here. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, and this is the most important step. If you skip everything else, it is what it is. But this step right here, you don't want to skip. All right. It's clarifying your goals and writing them down. There are so many, like it might sound inconsequential, but there are so many people who waste years studying languages, like literal years. And the reason why it's a waste is because they're studying in a way that doesn't actually help them achieve their goals. Right. So it's super important to study in such a way that you're actually going to be able to achieve your goals. Now, it sounds like common sense when I just go ahead and say it like outright like that, but let me give you a couple of examples. So for me, when I first started learning Vietnamese, I really focused heavily on reading because I thought that by reading, I would grow my vocabulary, and eventually with that grown vocabulary, I could transition that into speaking. Now, that did work. Like, I still have a pretty large vocabulary in Vietnamese, and I have transitioned a lot of those words over, but it was highly inefficient. It was a very inefficient process. What I should have done was really focus on my listening and speaking ability immediately, and got really good at that and not even worried about reading in the first place. I was spending so much time leveling up my skill of reading, which is overall completely unnecessary because I don't care about reading in Vietnamese. I'm not going to be reading novels in Vietnamese. The only reason why I would be doing that is for the sake of studying the language. My main goal in Vietnamese is to be able to communicate effectively. And so I should have been focused on effective communication from day one, and I wasn't. And I wasted a ton of time, right? It wasn't a complete waste of time because I did end up getting benefit, but overall, when you look at the course I should have taken, I had wasted a lot of time, right? And so another example of this is about a year ago, I went to Japan and I wanted to study Japanese before my trip. And so what I did was I ended up looking on Google, which you might have done before as well. What are the most efficient ways to learn a language, specifically the most efficient ways to learn Japanese? And I found a bunch of different methods. So I found remembering the kanji, which is basically studying characters out of context, Japanese characters. I found this textbook series called Genki, which is just teaching you grammar. And I found a couple other things. And I spent hours every day learning characters out of context, not even learning how to read them, just learning their meanings. I'd spent hours every day reading these Genki textbooks, which were basically just teaching you grammar. And so by the end of this month, I memorized a bunch of random grammar points that I could recite. And I had a bunch of random characters that I could look at out of context and tell what they might mean, right? And my actual Japanese speaking ability was next to nothing, right? And so when I actually went to Japan, there was very little I was able to say, and I couldn't really have any meaningful interactions. And so that's the danger of this, because when you look up effective methods, you're basically looking at a method that somebody designed for their own goals or for somebody else's goals, not for your specific goals. So you really have to take your specific goals into account and create your own study regimen, not just copy paste a bunch of random ones online that are effective for a specific thing and you don't get the outcome that you want, right? So those are my personal stories of how it sounds like such a simple thing of study for what your goals are, but I've messed this up twice, right? And there's so many people that have wasted years not clarifying their goals and writing them down. So once you have your goals, you've written them down, if you want to read, you're going to practice reading. So now I'm studying Japanese again, and now my goals are different. My goals are not to learn Japanese for travel communication. My goals are to learn Japanese to read manga. So now I'm really heavily focusing on reading, right? And so now I'm doing a reading focused approach on Japanese, and it's going really well for me, right? And with Vietnamese, I'm focusing entirely on listening and speaking, and that's increased drastically too. So pick your goals and pick a study method that's going to allow you to achieve those goals. So once you have your goals, there's something that you need to understand, and that is that language learning is a very unique hobby because it's one of the few hobbies that you can actually do as a part of your pure leisure time. Watching Netflix in your target language is a great way to learn, an incredible way to learn. And on top of that, if you just throw on a show and kind of just turn your brain off and just watch and enjoy, not only is that incredible practice, but it's relaxing. It's not effortful. You're just kind of letting the language process in your subconscious mind super effectively, and you're just enjoying yourself. You're just watching the show. So leisure learning, I'm going to call it like leisure learning, is super important for language learning because that's actually like how you use the language, right? It's really good. A lot of other pursuits, quote unquote leisure learning, like micro learning, all this stuff is actually just a huge waste of time. But with language learning, uniquely, it's not. So there's leisure learning and then there's study. And the mistake that a lot of people make is that they don't actually study. And so they take a lot longer than they really should to learn the language because they spend all of their time just like leisure learning, and which is cool, but you're not going to make progress nearly as fast as if you actually put time to deliberately study. And so what you want to do is strive for both every single day. So have some leisure learning and some study time. But I'd say like your main thing, especially as a beginner, should just be time with the language every day. So you don't want to create like these negative associations and really push yourself too far and burn out, because especially like with language learning, this stuff is very taxing on your brain. And if you try to do too much too quickly, you could really burn out. So I would say at a minimum, do one of those things a day, study or leisure learning at a minimum. So what that looks like, it could literally be like 1 10-minute YouTube video that you just watch all the way through, no pausing, no lookups, and that's your thing for the day, right? Or alternatively, what it could look like is a 30-minute study session, then an hour of Netflix. It could look like that. But like really right now as a beginner, your main thing is just to get in the habit of spending time with the language every day. Because ultimately, if you spend time with the language every day, you're going to get fluent eventually. Like you can't not get fluent eventually spending time with the language every day, unless you're like really freaking bad, dude. but like in reality, just as a beginner, you should strive for both every day. And so that's cool that you kind of get that. But leisure learning is kind of self-explanatory, just consuming content that you enjoy without thinking of studying or anything like that. But how do you actually study? Like, what do I mean by study? There's many different methods that you can employ, and I'm going to be explaining all of the basic methods here, and you can just pick one and see how it works for you. Specifically, pick it based on your goals as well, right? So the most popular study method is a program called Anki. Anki is an online flashcard program, and there's plenty of guides that you can look up on how to do Anki. I'm not going to get into that here because you don't need me for that. You can just look up somebody else's guide. It's super easy. But basically, you just get this program. You can use it on your phone, on the internet, whatever it may be, and you find a deck, right? A flashcard deck, and you just go through it. So you can just search up your language, like whatever your language is. So like you can search up, like, for example, Vietnamese, and then search up 1K, as in like 1,000. So Vietnamese 1K, search that up on Anki, and then you'll find a deck with the top 1,000 most commonly used words in the language. And what you're going to want to do is just study that every day. The standard for flashcards is 10 cards a day. That's usually like the average that people like to do. I'd recommend maybe starting with 5 if you're a beginner. And if you've been learning languages for a little while, maybe 10. And then keep it at that. Don't try to ramp up, because at first it's only going to be like 5 minutes a day, right? Which is super easy. But then what's going to happen is that it's a spaced repetition software. So it's going to prompt you to review the cards eventually. And so what's going to happen is that you're going to have to review like hundreds of cards a day, and then you're going to want to do your new cards after that. So it could get very overwhelming very quickly. Don't underestimate it. I've done this so many times. Just stick with 5 to 10 cards a day, and you'll be fine, right? And those are going to be the words that you're deliberately studying, and they're going to come up when you're doing your leisure learning of just watching Netflix, and that's how you're going to really absorb and learn the word for real. So Anki is a super popular program. It's free, and you could do that. A lot of people actually don't like using Anki though, because they just don't like flashcards. And if you don't like flashcards, you don't have to use them. Some people will like shove it down your throat and force you to do flashcards. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Another really good way to study is learner material. And this is basically just doing your leisure learning, but with material meant for beginners. And what you're doing here is you're actually looking up words that you don't understand. So you can find like beginner level videos on YouTube. This is really common. It's free. And then from there, you can just look up all the unknown words, or like a lot of the unknown words in that video. That's a beginner level video. Alternatively, you can find like short stories if your main goal is reading, and you can look up the unknown words in the short story and then keep going from there. And so this is actually what I did in Vietnamese. When I was first learning and overcoming like the from 0 level in Vietnamese, I didn't do Anki. I didn't do it at all until I was at an intermediate level. As a beginner, I just found learner material, which was like mainly short stories. And then I looked up all the unknown words in the short stories, and I would keep rereading them over and over again until I kind of had them down. And then I'd continue to the next story and just keep going like that. And that's going to build your vocabulary very quickly, and it's a very effective way to learn the language. So either one of those two is fine. Another technique, which is really, really powerful, and what I wish I had done much earlier in my language learning journey, is a technique called chorusing. Basically, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a 1 to 2 second clip of a native speaker speaking your target language, and then you're going to want to listen and repeat, and keep doing that until you sound like them. This is really good for pronunciation, and it also helps your listening ability because in order to speak it properly, you have to be able to hear it properly. This is one of the most effective drills you can possibly do if your language is, or if your main goal in the language is to be conversational. So listening and speaking, right? Training both of those skills at the same time. It's super, super valuable, right? So I would highly recommend this if your main goal is to be conversational and speak to people. Just be warned, it's not easy. Like I showed this technique to a friend and he took a 5 second clip at native speed and he tried to say it and he thought he could just simply listen and repeat, just simply listen and repeat. One does not simply listen and repeat. Like to actually produce the sounds of the language is really difficult. So oftentimes you might have to slow it down and it might take you like 20 minutes. Like when I first started doing this for Vietnamese, it would literally take me 20 entire minutes to get to the point where I could say one sentence at native speed with a good accent. Right. And so don't cut corners with this. Actually take your time and do it. This is the most difficult of the study methods by far, but it's the most rewarding. So if your main goal is listening, speaking, again, I've said this a million times, highly recommend trying this technique. And there's YouTube videos on how to do it. It's called chorusing. So like with all this stuff, Anki, chorusing, these terms might sound kind of complicated if you're a beginner, but you can just look them up, hundreds of tutorials on them. And it's like really simple once you kind of get it. And the final study method that I will explain to you is not studying at all. And this is called pure comprehensible input, or ALG, some people call it. But basically what you do is you find content on YouTube that is called comprehensible input. So like if your main goal is to study Spanish, you can search comprehensible Spanish on YouTube. And with those videos, you literally just watch it. You don't look up any words, you just watch it. And at first you're going to understand nothing, but eventually your brain is going to start figuring it out on its own. And this is actually how you learned your native language as like a baby. Like you didn't know anything. And then just from hearing enough of the language, you eventually began to pick it out and got to learn it. And so pure comprehensible input does work. It's just the slowest method by far because you're not like actually studying and looking up words. And so I would recommend just mixing this in with whatever other study method you want to do. But if you really just don't want to study, you can just go the pure comprehensible input route. But notice how I included pure comprehensible under learning and not under study and not under leisure learning, because with leisure learning, you're consuming native content, like content meant for like adults of the language, right? Or like native speakers. So even if you're doing the pure comprehensible input approach, where you're just learning from like videos of people talking in a really basic way and you're not looking up any words, I would still recommend watching regular native content as well, because you don't want to end up relying on the slow speed and the simple nature of the comprehensible input content and never really make your way up to the native content. You always want to be watching both. So that's another alternative for you, right? Once you get to the point where you feel kind of comfortable understanding beginner content and you feel like you're actually able to follow along to even like your native content when you're watching it, now you're at the point where you're at an intermediate level, right? If you have like some kind of software where you're tracking how many words you know, whether that be through Anki or another kind of software, then this is around the 2,000 word-ish point. You can kind of consider yourself to be an intermediate learner, right? And from here, you want to do this technique called sentence mining. And once you start sentence mining from native content, this is where you're no longer a beginner. This is the beginner's endgame. Once you sentence mine from native content, you are now an intermediate learner. So what sentence mining is basically you watch content in your target language without English subtitles. You can use your target language subtitles, but no English at all. So you're watching your content, and when you find a sentence that has one aspect of that sentence that you don't understand, you look that one point up, whether that's a grammar point or a word that you don't understand. You look it up, and then you add that to a flashcard software. So most likely Anki, or it could be Migaku if you're using that. And so once you add that to the flashcard software, you would then be reviewing that point on a regular basis based on the spaced repetition moving forward. And so that's how you grow your ability very quickly. And so basically what most people will kind of do as a beginner level is they will start with an Anki, like top 1,000 word deck. And then once they finish the Anki 1K deck, then they will create a new deck that's like empty, and they will start creating their own 10 sentences per day to learn from. And so that's a super effective technique. And sentence mining will take you all the way from intermediate to fluent. And you can even just start with sentence mining as a complete beginner, but as a beginner, it might be easier to use like pre-made decks and learner material and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. That's how you go from 0 to basically all the way to the end game, right? There's a couple things that you can expect along the way. The first thing is forgetting words. Sounds kind of obvious, but sometimes you'll get really frustrated because there'll be a word that you've spoken this word fluently hundreds of times, and then you just randomly forget it, and it just comes out of it just leaves your brain. You just can't remember it. And the thing that will console you with this is that this happens in English. Like with your native language, you'll just randomly forget a super basic word that you've spoken millions of times, and you just forget it. So this is a normal part of the process. Don't let it stress you out, because with me, it would really frustrate me sometimes until I kind of made the realization that like, oh, I do this in English too. Like I just forget words randomly. So totally normal. Another thing that is really important to keep in mind is that your perceived ability in the language will fluctuate wildly. So in reality, language learning has a very specific growth where at first it's exponential, like I'll put a picture on the screen of exponential growth, right? Where it's like you're learning very, very fast because all the words that you learn are very common words and they get repeated so often. Then the curve kind of flattens out and you're learning rather slowly because the words that you're learning are less and less common. But that's not how you perceive it. You perceive it as this crazy graph of like one day, oh my gosh, I'm fluent, I've done it. And then the next day, oh, I suck, right? And that's completely normal. Like I've had days in Vietnamese where there literally is like, I will watch content for like 5+ hours and I'll only find like a small handful of words that I don't understand. And I'll be thinking like, wow, I am straight up fluent in Vietnamese. I've done it. I'm fluent. I've reached the end game. And then the very next day, I'll watch a movie and I will literally understand nothing for some reason. Like I'll just not understand the movie at all. And I'll just like think that like, wow, am I really still a beginner? Like I thought I was fluent already, right? This is a very normal phenomenon. It happens with all of us. So don't trip when it happens to you. If anything, that's how you know you're really a language learner, when you're experiencing this type of thing and you're really like, you're in it, right? So that's my video on how to learn a language. I have a request for you, all right? Do not watch any more videos on how to learn a language. Don't. Take this framework that I gave you. I'm going to put it up on screen too, all right? Take this framework and just do it. Just follow it, right? After a couple months, maybe a year, depending on the language and what kind of time you're able to put into it, you will be at an intermediate level. And you will be able to have conversations and understand conversations. What often prevents people from making real progress is switching from method to method to method. Oh, now I'm focusing on reading. Now I'm focusing on listening. Now you know what I'm saying? So take what I've given you here. Don't watch any more videos. Just actually apply this stuff. And before you know it, you'll be at an intermediate level where you can have and enjoy conversations in the language. All right. Thank you for listening.